Hello, I'm Cheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One to One. The headlines in recent weeks have been filled with reports about violence against women and children. The horrific videos of NFL player Ray Rice knocking out his fiancée. Pictures of the bruises inflicted on his two sons by Adrian Peterson in the process of disciplining them. The Columbia student who is dragging a mattress around campus to protest the university's response to her own on-campus rape, and numerous other incidents in which professional or college athletes have allegedly abused women. Has there been an uptick in domestic violence, or are we just hearing more about it? Why do institutions like the NFL and some of our most elite colleges and universities seem to tolerate it? Why does society at large seem to tolerate violence against women when the men involved are students or athletes with promising futures? And how many other women and children are suffering in silence? Former Judge Judy Harris Kluger became executive director of Sanctuary for Families in January after serving for 25 years on the bench. We'll discuss some of those issues with her. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I mentioned the Ray Rice story, which is probably the biggest story in recent weeks. The punching out incident resulted in his being suspended from the NFL, and widespread criticism of the NFL for not taking tougher disciplinary action sooner, and in calls for the NFL commissioner's resignation. Why do you think this incident has roused so much public indignation?
The reason is that video showed in such a graphic way really the ferocity of domestic violence in a way that we don't generally see about crimes. Domestic violence happens in homes. This kind of thing, unfortunately, happens in homes throughout the country every day. We're seeing that graphic nature of the act that I think raised people's consciousness in a way that hasn't been for quite some time.
Because seeing is believing.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
At the same time, there have been public expressions of support and sympathy for, the alleged abusers. Ray Rice went back to the homecoming football game at his old high school in New Rochelle and was greeted, with high fives and, pats on the back by his coach and members of the team.
I think we make heroes of people for the wrong reasons, and sports figures become heroes, and the sad thing is the kids in our world look up to these people for the wrong reasons. So that's why, sadly, people are clapping when they go back on the field.
Now, some people would say, okay, football is a violent sport. We encourage them to be violent, so it's, so why should we be surprised when they use some of that violence off the field? Yet I was surprised to learn that the rate of domestic violence among players in the NFL is actually lower than in the general population overall.
So I never bought that argument. If you're violent on the field, that means you're going to be violent at home, because that really maligns all the people who live very peaceful, quiet, and legal lives who play football and other sports. And I often say about men who batter their wives, they're fine controlling their anger with their bosses and their friends. It's just their intimate partner that they abuse.
The NFL has initiated some reforms in response to the Ray Rice case. They've announced that there's going to be a 6-month suspension for the first incident of domestic violence and a lifetime ban for a second offense. They've been meeting with everybody, the players union, the former players, the spouses of players, to get advice on how to handle this problem. What do you think of what the NFL is doing?
I think the NFL realized it made a serious mistake and was ignorant on the issues around domestic violence. And to that extent, I credit them with trying to change. And it requires bringing in people who understand the issue, who've worked with victims of domestic violence, and the proof will be how they react to the next incident that happens.
In most incidents of domestic violence against women, at least it's been my observation, even when the woman presents with black eyes, bruises, broken bones, the man will say, will always deny hitting her. I never hit her. I pushed her, or we were wrestling and she fell, but will never say, I hit her. Why do you think abusive men are unable to admit to what they've done?
Well, I think by and large, people don't want to admit that they committed a crime, and certainly that they committed a crime against someone they purport to love. So it's not unusual, and what makes it difficult is, as we know, sometimes the victim does not want to proceed with the case, and their abuser denies it, and there is no other additional evidence. But nowadays, prosecutors really build cases without the testimony of the victim.
What do you think the Ray Rice case has done for public awareness about domestic violence? I mean, at Sanctuary for Families, have you experienced an increase in calls from abused women and more women and children coming to your shelters? Have you felt any fallout from it?
Well, I think the best part of this bad situation is that we're talking about domestic violence in a way that we probably have never done. I think the woman who started the hashtag Why I Stayed, kind of allowing the public to understand that women stay, and Mrs. Rice stayed because it's love, it's children, sometimes it's threats, sometimes it's economics. So I think what's happened is we're learning more, the public is learning more about domestic violence, and hopefully realizing that it is not something that's just a family matter. It's a crime, it needs to be stopped, and we need to make heroes of the people who lead law-abiding lives, not people who do this.
The last time case that spotlighted domestic violence in this way, I mean, for me, was the O.J. Simpson case.
Right.
Just a long time ago.
Yeah, and fortunately, nobody died in this incident. And I think things have changed in the last 20 years, and I think there's been a lot of positive movement around issues of domestic violence, the Violence Against Women Act, which is 20 years old this year. Police forces no longer walk abusers around the block to cool off and let them go back into their homes. I mean, I think as a society in general, and our legal system has recognized it as a crime, unfortunately it still continues, and that's why this kind of publicity brings it to the fore in a way that I think will educate the public.
Now, I mentioned the case of Emma Sulkowka, I suspect is the correct pronunciation. The Columbia University student who is dragging a mattress all over campus to publicize her alleged rape by another Columbia student 2 years ago, and what she considers the university's inadequate response to that incident. This has been a big issue on colleges and universities around the country. The U.S. Department of Education says that reported sexual attacks at U.S. colleges jumped almost 80% between 2001 and 2012. And there was just in today's Daily News, there's a story about a study that was done of violent acts against, I think, mostly women at the SUNY campuses. So what's happening? Why is this happening? Are we just hearing more about it?
I think we're hearing more about it. I think there's been on campuses correctly a recognition that some of their administrative proceedings in these cases have been less than credible, and there's more discussion about it. There was a wonderful piece written by Gloria Steinem and someone else, I don't remember the person's name, in the New York Times, about the fact that people should be able to say, yes, I want this, and no, I don't. And saying yes and agreeing is a way to ensure that these things don't happen on campus in the same way. What
do you think about Ms. Sulkowka's project?
You know, I don't know the facts of the case. I don't know what happened, but certainly she has found a way to express her disappointment in how the university handled the case, and I think she is certainly being heard.
It's a difficult issue for colleges and universities, isn't it?
I don't think it should be.
No?
I don't think so. I think the same way you can't do this anyplace else, there should be rules around these kind of things on college campuses. And the same way the NFL is trying to learn how to and educate itself on how to handle these things, college campuses have to do that. And I know the president came out with a report recently about sexual assaults on campuses. So there is a national discussion around that, which I think is very positive.
Do you think there is a societal hesitance to discipline men who are accused of violence against women when the men are star athletes or when they are college students who seem to have a lot of future promise? Because, we don't want to ruin the future prospects of promising men. Do you think that that is something that exists?
I hope not, but I think the fact is that people who are more recognized in society as being successful sometimes get a pass in when they do something wrong, and we really have to change that. Again, I think that this issue has highlighted it, and hopefully society and our justice system, as well as our college campuses and our teams, will reflect that change.
By the same token, and you were Bureau Chief of the Sex Crimes and Domestic Violence Bureau in the Brooklyn DA's office, is there less hesitance about going after violent men whose prospects are not so bright? I mean, say, working class men, men of color who don't happen to be star athletes or Columbia students.
Well, I can talk about my experience as a prosecutor and a judge, and we took our cases as they came to us. And that meant regardless of someone's status in life, we handled it in a way that followed the law and did not reflect what their status was. That being said, if you have money and power, you can hire the best lawyers, and you can get the best defense, and you have advantages that others don't.
We're going to take a short break, then we'll be back with more with the Honorable Judy Harris Kluger, Executive Director of Sanctuary for Families, after the following message. Welcome back to One to One. I'm Cheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York, and I'm talking with the Honorable Judy Harris Kluger, Executive Director of Sanctuary for Families. You've been working in this whole area of domestic violence for a long time, in the Brooklyn DA's office, as a judge in the criminal courts, as an administrative judge with oversight over the creation of integrated domestic violence courts. How has New York City evolved in the way it responds to domestic violence and rape cases over the years?
My career really has tracked a lot of the changes in both attitude and law in New York, I would say in the last 25 to 30 years. And the difference is, when I started as a prosecutor, cases of domestic violence were routinely sent to mediation, as if the abuser and the victim could somehow sit across the table and mediate the violence. Surprisingly, until 20 years ago, you had to choose between the family court and the criminal courts within 72 hours if you were a victim of domestic violence. That means you had to say, well, I'm going to go along with the criminal prosecution, then I can't access the family court, or vice versa. So, I mean, these are major changes. I mean, when I started as a prosecutor, you were allowed to rape your wife. If you were the victim of rape, you had to show earnest resistance to the attacker. So we've made a lot of progress. We haven't stopped the crime from happening. We haven't solved the issue of domestic violence. But at least the courts and the criminal justice system and the police navigate this in a very different way.
So there is a crime of marital rape, or just rape?
Well, it's rape.
Okay.
Yeah, it's rape, and it used to be a defense that rape had to occur if you were not married to the person who was the victim. Mm-hmm. Earnest resistance. You didn't have to earnestly resist a robber, but you had to earnestly resist a rapist. Even some of the reforms we did in the courts over the last few years, the court system in New York is structured in a very Byzantine way. And if you were the victim of domestic violence, you had to be in criminal court for the criminal case. You had to go to a separate family court judge for the family matter, and a different court to get a divorce. So we recognized that that was a very difficult system to navigate. So we integrated the courts so that now one judge handles all aspects of the case, which certainly is beneficial to the entire family, actually.
What are you able to do as Executive Director of Sanctuary for Families for victims of domestic violence or rape that you were not able to do as an assistant DA or as a judge?
Oh, the Sanctuary for Families is a place where we provide a whole host of assistance for victims in a way that I couldn't before, either as a prosecutor or a judge. We help victims in the courts, family court. We obtain divorces for them. We help them in their immigration matters. We have 30 trained master's level social workers who do counseling. We have a very robust and mature economic empowerment program which teaches women skills so that they can go out, support themselves, and not have to go back to the abuser. We run a shelter that I call a wonderful place where people are there for a terrible reason, where we provide all kinds of support for families who really have no place else to go. We do advocacy on issues that are important to our clients. You know, I couldn't advocate in this way as a judge. I was actually freed in a way to be able to talk about the issue in a way I couldn't, not as a judge or even as a prosecutor. So Sanctuary is a wonderful place with strong, supportive people to help people in a very difficult situation.
How many cases / individuals do you serve each year?
We serve about 11,000 individuals each year, women and children. We handle several thousand cases in the courts each year. And we have 2,000 volunteers, including 500 lawyers who work for us, in addition to our staff, who work for us on a volunteer basis, to everything representing victims in court to tutoring kids after school. We have a terrific after-school program for the children of our victims. We provide them with tutoring, dance therapy, drama therapy, basically a safe place to be while their mothers are getting the support that they need.
Do you see any trends in your cases? I mean, more immigrant women, for example, and children, for example?
Many immigrant women and children. About 75% of our clients are immigrants. And we have learned that we need to be culturally competent for those, for all our clients. We speak 33 languages. Including very common languages like Spanish and French, but we also speak Dutch, and we speak African dialects, and we speak Mandarin, because at Sanctuary we recognize the importance of people feeling comfortable with our staff. And what's more comfortable than someone that speaks your language?
Do you have any cases involving either sexual mutilation, I'm talking about female circumcision, or threatened, threatened sexual mutilation, where they come to you for protection?
Yes, we do. Unfortunately, female genital mutilation is an issue. It's obviously illegal in this country, but sometimes people are sent back to their home countries, kids on vacation, and that happens. So we work with the mothers and the kids to protect them and prevent that from happening.
How about violence against lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender couples? Do they come to you?
They do. As a matter of fact, we have a lawyer who specializes in that area, but all our lawyers are capable of handling those cases as well. And unfortunately, there is domestic violence in same-sex couples as well as heterosexual couples.
So tell us about, well, is Sanctuary for Families able to help victims of domestic violence in ways that perhaps it couldn't 20 years ago? How have the nature of the services changed?
Well, economic empowerment was a relatively new program started by my predecessor, Laurel Eisner, and we recognize that the only way people can get out of violent situations and not have to be with the abuser is to be economically independent. All immigration work is relatively new. Mm-hmm. We go to court and go to administrative proceedings to allow our clients to get special kind of visas that allow them to stay in this country because they are victims of domestic violence or sex trafficking.
Now, how does that work? What's the logic? What's the logic behind that?
That you are, you're here, you are a victim of violence, and we as a country protect you.
That in a sense you're a refugee from violence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly right. We also, our work around sex trafficking is relatively new. We recognize, as our lawyers began to talk to many of our clients, that sex trafficking was probably the most extreme form of domestic violence, that many of the women who came to us as victims, when we delved deeper, they had been trafficked by their boyfriend, who turned into their pimp. And it wasn't just sex trafficking of foreign women being brought over. It was sex trafficking from Brooklyn to Manhattan, from Queens to Nassau County. And many of these clients are immigrants, so they are protected by federal legislation that allows them to stay in this country, awaiting citizenship. So Sanctuary started out very small. We were a shelter. That's why we're called Sanctuary. Started by several women who recognized that victims of domestic violence needed a place to be 30 years ago. They began to house them in their homes and realized that was not a model that was sustainable. We bought a building, we became a shelter, and realized that we needed to provide more than that. So our organization has evolved into the biggest single provider of domestic violence services in the city.
Where do you get your funding from?
Variety of sources, government contracts and state and city and federal grants, as well as private funding. We rely on very generous donors who support our work because they recognize the importance of it.
Can you tell me a success story or two?
Sure. There was a very sad and terrible case of a woman who was killed by her husband, who had 3 young children, and she had a brother. And the brother wanted very much to have custody of those children. And one of our lawyers, Linda Lopez, represented him throughout the family courts, and he has custody of these kids. We just saw him recently at an event that we had, the Abley Awards, and he's the happy, sad for having the loss in his family, but father of 3 who is raising these children who went through such tremendous trauma, but giving them the life that they should have.
Now, viewers who want to help, what should they do? What can they do?
Certainly, they can donate to Sanctuary for Families, go on our website. We, of course, welcome that kind of support. We also welcome volunteers, anywhere from our butterfly boutique, where our clients can pick out clothing as if they are in a store. Everything is new, and because we feel they deserve that, to people who tutor our kids after school and who play with our kids in the shelter. So there's a lot of opportunity. We have a very robust volunteer program, and we are, I think, very adept at finding what people are best at and having them help us in that way.
Was this an area that you ever anticipated specializing in or getting into in a very committed way when you went to law school or even before that?
I always knew I'd be in public service in some way. I grew up in a family where social justice was very important. My parents are immigrants, survivors of the Second World War, who had tremendous love for this country. And so I always knew I'd have a life in public service. And I often say, you make choices when you're young, and who knows why I took the job in the Brooklyn DA's office? Probably because it was the first job that I was offered, maybe the only job. But I was fortunate to be one of the founding members of the Domestic Violence Bureau in the DA's office, and that's where my passion started and has stayed.
Well, this continues to be obviously a very big issue, and it's not going to go away anytime soon, and we're fortunate to have Sanctuary for Families doing some very important work in the area.
Thank you so much.
I'm afraid we're out of time. My thanks to the Honorable Judy Harris Kluger for joining me today. If you'd like more information about Sanctuary for Families, their website is sanctuaryforfamilies.org. For the City University of New York and 1 to 1, I'm Cheryl McCarthy. If there are any people you'd like to hear from or topics you'd like us to explore, please let us know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.